Hey, so today I'd like to go through neighbor tones with you. Now, neighbor tones go by a couple of names. They can be called neighbor tones because they're neighbors to chord tones or arpeggio tones, and they're also considered sometimes auxiliary tones and even approach tones. So you've got three names that you might use to refer or hear folks talk about neighbor tones. Now, neighbor tones can be chromatic or diatonic. Now, chromatic is obviously from the chromatic scale, but diatonic is from either the key center or directly from the scale of construction for a particular chord. So we're going to work with a major arpeggio and the neighbor tones that go with the major arpeggio. We're going to use lower chromatic neighbors, and I'm doing this on a G arpeggio. No need for transposition because we're not using play-along tracks or anything. So I'm going to use the notes from a G arpeggio. Neighbor, lower chromatic neighbors, upper diatonic neighbors. That means right out of the G scale. And I've got three patterns I'll show you that are really cool. One addresses directly lower neighbors, the other one addresses upper neighbors, and the final one uses a combination of lower and upper neighbors, lower chromatic, upper diatonic. Now, neighbor tones can be used in your improvisation as solitary units. I mean, you can use neighbor tones going directly to chord tones, or they can be combined with other neighbor tones to make enclosures. We're not going to create any enclosures today, but we're just going to use neighbor tones on these roots, thirds, fifths, and upper roots. So the ones, threes, fives, and eights. Now keep in mind 8 is the same as 1, just up an octave. Now a little preliminary exercise. Let's establish the range that we're going to work with. We're going to use a 2-octave G major arpeggio in a cycle because I don't want to go into the altissimo. These certainly they can be used in the altissimo, but we're going to create a 2-octave G arpeggio cycle from low G up to high D, descend down to low D, back to G, like this. Now, as you play that, register the 1, 3, 5, 8, 1, 3, 5. Register the numbers in your mind as you practice that. And then we're going to also, I'd like to use a staggered descent on the arpeggio, kind of a zigzag descent like this, as we descend from the high register to the low registers. So on our ascent, we'll still use. But on the descent, we're going to stagger the root, the third, the 5, the 8, just like the numbers show in the example here. The whole thing. So in your practice, take a few minutes and kind of get that in your hands and in your mind so that you're not having to think about that sequence of tones. That way, that won't distract you thinking about the sequence of tones that we'll embellish with our neighbor tones. You won't be distracted by having to try to think of these notes. You just want to learn them. Now, our first pattern is going to use the lower chromatic neighbors with each of the tones in that ascending and staggered descending arpeggio. So you can see here I've got the root, the third, the fifth, the 8, the 3, the 5, the descending arpeggio tones. I've got them all identified in the example, and the notes that precede each of these arpeggio or chord tones. Remember, arpeggio tones are the same as chord tones. You'll see I've got a lower chromatic neighbor before each one. So F sharp to G, A sharp to B, C sharp to D, F sharp to G. So I'll play the whole pattern for you. There we go, around the 2-octave cycle with the staggered descent. So my suggestion would be to practice that as many times as you need to get that in your hands without having to, you don't want to have to read this stuff. You want to just know this stuff. And then we'll proceed to the same selection of arpeggio tones with the same staggered descent, but we'll apply upper diatonic neighbors. Now, one thing you might notice is that I'm playing all of these with the neighbor tones currently in these two patterns, the first two patterns I'll show you. I'm playing the neighbor tones on the upbeat or syncopated portion of the beat, and 1 and 2 and 3. So all of the neighbor tones are coming on the ands, and the chord tones are coming on the downbeats. They don't have to be played that way. The neighbor tones can be played on the downbeat going to an upbeat, and in the third pattern I'll show you in a minute, we'll use neighbor tones in that position, and that's a pretty cool pattern as well. Okay, so let's move on again to the upper diatonic neighbors. These are notes right out of the scale, right out of the G major scale. So you can see I've got an upper neighbor to the G. That's the A to the G, right out of the G major scale. The C to the B. The C is right out of the scale. It's chromatic also, but it's right out of the scale. And the E to the D. Again, the upper diatonic neighbor to the 5. Now, when I play this all the way around, again with the staggered descent, here's what I get. Another pretty cool sounding pattern. And, practice this one until you can play it without having to think about it. So now let's move ahead to what I think of as an over and under pattern. Actually, this one should be under and over. You might think of it as over and under on the descent in a minute, but under and over and under. I kind of like the way over and under rolls off my tongue, so that's why I named it the over and under pattern. And so I'm going to start out with a lower chromatic neighbor to the root, followed by an upper diatonic neighbor to the third, followed by a lower chromatic to the third, and back to the third, followed by an upper diatonic to the 5, back to the 5. So we've got lower chord tone, upper chord tone, lower chord tone, upper chord tone. F sharp, G, lower chromatic to the G, to the root, upper diatonic, C to B, lower chromatic to the third, again the B, A sharp to B, upper diatonic to the 5, that's E to D, lower chromatic to the 5, C sharp to D. And then it really sounds cool on the descent, I think. So on the ascent, that might be a familiar sound to you, I'm not sure. Now on the descent, listen to this. I really dig this one. Man, that's really a cool pattern, I think. Now, you can easily transfer this to all the different keys, all 12 major keys, and you can even do these patterns, these neighbor tone patterns, you can do them in minor as well, or with any type of chord. You could do them with half diminished, diminished. Now, when you do them with diminished, you kind of get the diminished scale. But either way, these are great patterns to work on. I'll include a cheat sheet with the PDF that has this written out in all 12 keys, but gosh, I would really love for you to learn it without reading in all 12 keys. Now, I'm Randy Hunter. BeginningsAX.com is my website, www.beginningsax.com. If you'd like a PDF of everything from this video, just drop me an email and I'd be happy to send it to you. Just ask for the over and under pattern and I'll send it to you. And while you're at the website, be sure to check out my jazz improvisation and beginning sax lessons if those are right for you. I've got tons and tons of lessons available, and I've also got a subscription website, randyhunterjazz.vhx.tv, where you can subscribe to my complete lesson series for a reasonable monthly rate. And there's a forum there too you might consider visiting. And I love to have subscribers there because I'm always posting new things there. So and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel while you're here, please.